Welcome to G Fun Facts Online. We often picture George Washington as the stoic figure on the dollar bill, a flawless general carved from marble. But the real man was forged in the chaos of conflict, and some of his most profound lessons came not from glorious victories, but from the horrifying confusion of friendly fire. For centuries, these stories were just footnotes in history books. But now, thanks to archaeology, we're digging up the truth, and it reveals a more human, more complex, and far more interesting leader than the one we thought we knew. The story starts long before the American Revolution, in the brutal wilderness classroom of the French and Indian War. In the spring of 1754, a 22-year-old Lieutenant Colonel George Washington, hungry for military glory, led a small force of Virginia militiamen and their Mingo allies into the contested Ohio Valley. Their goal was to assert British authority over a region the French were actively claiming. On the morning of May 28th, they surrounded a small French encampment in a rocky ravine known as Jumonville Glen. What happened next lasted only 15 minutes, but would ignite a global war. A shot rang out. Who fired first is still debated, and a brief, vicious skirmish erupted. The French commander, Ensign Jumonville, was killed along with several of his men. The French government immediately branded it an assassination, claiming Jumonville was on a diplomatic mission. This controversy haunted Washington for years and became a major justification for the escalating conflict. For centuries, that was the main story of Jumonville Glen. But a recently discovered eyewitness account has added a stunning, tragic layer. A document from a chief warrior who fought alongside Washington reveals that in the confusion of the fight, the Virginians unluckily shot their own man, who had moved ahead of their lines. This single sentence, overlooked for over 250 years, suggests that Washington's very first experience in command was marred by a friendly fire casualty. This historical tidbit is now being corroborated by science. A 2023 archaeological investigation at the site, a partnership between the National Park Service and organizations like the American Veterans Archaeological Recovery, has physically verified the location of the skirmish. By meticulously excavating the area, they've found tangible evidence of the fight that started the French and Indian War. They've unearthed 18th century musket balls, and analysis of their caliber confirms the presence of both British and French forces. While finding direct evidence of a single friendly fire victim is nearly impossible, the archaeological findings paint a clear picture of a chaotic, close-quarters engagement. As Fort Necessity's chief of interpretation Brian Reedy described it, this was a 15-minute skirmish that occurs here will change the world. The ongoing analysis of these artifacts continues to shed new light on the positioning of the fighters and the sequence of that brief but momentous clash. 4 years later, in 1758, Washington, now a more seasoned 26-year-old colonel in charge of the Virginia Regiment, would face a friendly fire incident so terrifying that he would later describe it as the most perilous moment of his entire life. This happened during the Forbes Expedition, a massive British campaign to capture the strategic French stronghold of Fort Duquesne, located where modern-day Pittsburgh now stands. On November 12th, near a newly built British outpost called Fort Ligonier, a French and Native American raiding party attacked a herd of British horses. In response, 2 Virginia regiments were sent out to intercept them. One was commanded by Washington himself, the other by his fellow Virginian, Colonel George Mercer. The timing couldn't have been worse. As dusk settled over the landscape, a thick fog descended, wrapping the dense woods in a blanket of confusion and low visibility. In the swirling mist and fading light, Washington's and Mercer's men mistook each other for the French enemy. A heavy, sustained volley of fire erupted between the 2 Virginian regiments. Washington's own men were shooting at Mercer's, and Mercer's men were shooting right back. Years later, Washington described the absolute chaos of that moment. He wrote, "Commenced a heavy fire upon the relieving party which drew fire in return, in spite of all the exertions of the officers, one of whom, and several privates were killed, and many wounded before a stop could be put to it. In this moment of supreme crisis, with his men killing each other around him, Washington's leadership was put to the ultimate test. He didn't hesitate. He galloped his horse directly between the two firing lines of his own men, a truly insane act of bravery. As muskets were leveled and aimed, he rode down the lines, using his sword to physically knock the barrels of the guns upwards, desperately shouting for his men to cease fire. He later recalled that his life was in as much jeopardy as it had ever been before or since. The tragic results were devastating. 2 officers and at least 13 soldiers were killed, with some estimates putting the total casualties as high as 40. For more than 2 centuries, the exact location of this harrowing event was lost to time, a ghost on the historical landscape. But in recent years, a dedicated team of archaeologists, led by Jonathan Burns of Juniata College, has rediscovered the battlefield on private land a few miles from Fort Ligonier. Using a combination of old maps, historical accounts, metal detectors, and ground-penetrating radar, the team has unearthed a treasure trove of over 350 artifacts that have pinpointed the site of the tragic encounter. The artifacts they've recovered provide a tangible, almost personal connection to the soldiers who lived and died there on that foggy November evening. They've found uniform buttons, shoe buckles, fragments of gear, and of course, musket balls. One particularly poignant find was a French officer's pocket watch key, decorated with a fleur-de-lis, likely taken as a souvenir from the initial skirmish that started the whole incident. These aren't just objects. As archaeologist Jonathan Burns says, this is an emotional, human story about leadership, confusion, loss, and a moment that changed history. The real magic of this archaeological work lies in the spatial analysis. By mapping exactly where each artifact was found, the team, which includes volunteers from the Veterans Archaeology Program, can reconstruct the battlefield. These veterans bring their own modern combat experience, offering unique insights into how soldiers might behave under fire. For example, the discovery of ornate sock garter buckles far from the main road suggests some of Washington's men sought higher ground for a better firing position during the firefight. This data allows them to trace the positions of the 2 Virginia regiments and understand the chaotic sequence of events as they unfolded. Advanced analysis of the musket balls can also help verify the initial raid by French forces, confirming the historical accounts. The discoveries humanize the soldiers, turning them from names on a casualty list into real people who dropped a button or lost a buckle in the heat of battle. The friendly fire incidents of the French and Indian War, especially the horrific event near Fort Ligonier, left a permanent mark on George Washington. These were not just isolated tragedies. They were defining educational experiences that shaped his entire approach to command. The chaos of these encounters hammered home the critical importance of clear communication, proper reconnaissance, and strict battlefield discipline, lessons he would never forget and would later apply as commander of the Continental Army. This brutal education in the unforgiving American wilderness taught him to blend the formal strategies of the British Army with the guerrilla tactics of his Native American allies, creating his own unique and effective style of leadership. These events also revealed Washington's own fallibility. He was a young, ambitious, and sometimes impulsive commander, but crucially, he learned from his mistakes. His willingness to adapt his strategies and to take personal responsibility for the lives of his men became hallmarks of his character. The 1758 incident, in particular, showcased his incredible physical courage. His act of riding between the firing lines to save his men would have earned him their undying respect and loyalty. Interestingly, the tragedy had an unforeseen strategic silver lining. During the confusion, several French soldiers were captured. Under interrogation, they provided General Forbes with critical intelligence. Fort Duquesne was critically undermanned and vulnerable. This prompted Forbes to press his attack immediately, and the British were able to capture the fort without a major fight, achieving the primary goal of the entire expedition. Shortly after this campaign, Washington resigned his commission and returned to Mount Vernon. He wouldn't command troops again until the American Revolution. But the officer who returned was not the same one who had set out years earlier. The young man who inadvertently started a war at Jumonville Glen and who stared death in the face amidst friendly fire at Ligonier had been transformed into a seasoned, resilient, and thoughtful leader. The archaeological work at these forgotten sites opens a new window into the formative years of one of history's most iconic figures. It reminds us that history isn't just found in dusty archives, but is also written in the soil beneath our feet. By unearthing the physical remnants of these tragic events, we gain a more nuanced and human understanding of Washington, not as a marble statue, but as a leader who was forged, tested, and ultimately defined, not by the absence of failure, but in the very heart of it.